Beneath the ocean's surface, where light can't reach and logic starts to drown, humans thought we'd seen it all. Until water caught fire, ice grew in boiling seas, and something that looked suspiciously like a giant footprint showed up strolling across the seafloor of Abkhazia Bay. We found a hole that sucks in the sea like a portal to the underworld, a stone road that goes absolutely nowhere, and a disc-shaped rock that might be an ancient UFO, or just Mother Nature having a laugh. Welcome to 7 Mysteries Beneath the Waves, where science, speculation, and a very confused narrator try to keep up with the ocean's secrets. Hit like and subscribe so you don't miss the next deep-sea twist, and drop a comment. Which one do you think is real, and which one is just the ocean messing with us? What if the ocean, normally the one thing that puts out fire, suddenly burst into flames? No storms, no oil spills, just calm water igniting on its own. In certain corners of the world, that's not fiction, it's fact. Flames rising straight from the sea, fed by invisible gas leaking from deep, mysterious underwater caves. Science calls it methane seepage. Locals call it the mouth of the sea demon. And no one really knows what's hiding down there. Because when water burns, what else is possible beneath the waves? We're taught that water kills fire, that the sea, vast and cold, is nature's extinguisher. But in certain corners of the world, that logic breaks. Off the coast of East Java in Indonesia, near the island of Sangihe, and around the Caspian Sea off Turkmenistan, fishermen have reported seas that, under calm skies and glassy surfaces, catch fire without warning. A peaceful stretch of ocean, no oil slick, no lightning strike, no volcanic tremor. A stream of bubbles rises from the depths. Then, in silence, the surface ignites. Not an explosion, just a steady, spectral flame, hovering above the waves like it's always belonged there. In Makassar Strait and parts of the Black Sea, the phenomenon repeats. Gold and crimson flames shimmer against the deep blue, curling and flickering in patterns no human hand has drawn. The water remains still beneath them, eerily unbothered, like a mirror hosting a secret it refuses to reflect. It's a sight that disturbs something deep inside. Fire and water, no longer opposites, but coexisting in defiance of every rule we've trusted. It feels wrong, like watching snow burn, or hearing thunder from a clear sky. Logic dissolves into heat and gas, and one question surfaces, unshakable. If the ocean can burn, what else is it hiding? When divers trace the path of flames flickering above the sea, they often find themselves led to deep, shadowed rifts beneath the waves, gaping sea caves or narrow blowholes, like the open mouths of something ancient and unseen. From these dark fissures, bubbles rise not playfully, but with purpose, not the gentle fizz of scuba tanks, but thick, deliberate streams, the breath of methane, invisible yet dangerously alive. This gas, though unseen, is no passive presence. Under the right spark, a stray match, the scrape of metal, it erupts into flame, climbing out of the sea like fire escaping prison. It's the most accepted theory, that methane seeps from decaying organic matter or hidden geological faults, rising steadily from the ocean floor. But theories only go so far, because methane isn't supposed to behave like this. In open water, it dissolves, breaks apart, fades away, long before it can gather and burn. For flames to appear at the surface, the gas must first be forced up in dense, concentrated surges, which suggests something deeper, something more enclosed. A sealed chamber, a labyrinth of stone, a cave system beneath the sea floor, that compresses the gas like a breath held too long. But here lies the deeper mystery. No one has mapped these caves. No one knows how wide they stretch, how deep they plunge, or what else moves in the dark beyond them. They breathe, they burn, and whatever waits inside them has so far kept its silence. Science stands on the shore. You'd think with today's technology, submersibles, sonar, underwater drones, we'd have answers. But in most of these fire cave regions, the reality is disappointing and terrifying. No one has done a full survey. Why? These areas are geologically unstable. Equipment often malfunctions near them, and there have been cases where robotic probes lost signal or returned melted. The temperature of the water around these methane-emitting caves has been recorded to spike suddenly, as if something is heating it from below. Not geothermal vents, not lava, just something. Even the few manned expeditions that tried to go deeper into these fire mouths were called off early. Divers reported feeling vibrations in the water. Sensors picked up low-frequency hums, like some kind of deep, subaqueous growl. And then there are the stories, unconfirmed of course, of missing vessels, unexplained sonar shadows, and transmissions that never should have happened from machines that had already been lost. Even when the science is ready, the world around these fire-breathing zones often isn't. Some of the most promising sites lie within military-restricted waters or in areas declared spiritually sacred by local communities for generations. The ocean may be international, but its access is anything but free. In one well-known case in Southeast Asia, a research team equipped with submersibles and deep-sea sensors was forced to abandon their mission halfway through. As the vessel anchored near a suspected fire-emitting sea cave, villagers gathered on the shore with torches and boats, threatening to sink the researchers' support craft unless they left immediately. Their message was clear. The scientists had, in their words, offended the fire spirit. It's easy to dismiss such events as superstition, but when these beliefs consistently emerge around the same types of phenomena in different parts of the world, separated by language and culture, something deeper starts to surface. These warnings, even if wrapped in myth, may be the last echoes of a knowledge passed down not through textbooks, but through fear. Long before modern instruments dipped beneath the waves, coastal communities already knew where the ocean misbehaved, where the water hissed without wind, where boats vanished in calm seas, where fire licked the surface under a cloudless sky. They didn't need sonar to mark these places. They gave them names. In Papua New Guinea, elders speak of a serpent that sleeps beneath the waves, its breath rising as fire whenever disturbed. In parts of Indonesia, entire fishing villages avoid certain stretches of sea, claiming they're cursed, that any who speak lies near them risk awakening the mouth of flame. In the Black Sea, ancient maritime maps mark uncharted waters with curled symbols and cryptic notes, warning sailors to pass in silence. And what's most unnerving is not just that these stories exist, but how they line up. Different continents, different gods, different legends, but the same details: the fire, the breath, the warning. Centuries apart, cultures oceans away, and yet somehow they all point to the same impossible truth, that beneath the surface lies something that listens, and sometimes responds. The ocean doesn't need to roar to terrify us. Sometimes all it takes is a quiet flame rising from a perfectly calm surface to shake the very foundations of what we thought we understood. Those flames, seemingly small and meaningless, might actually be signs of something far greater, a vast system hidden deep beneath, untouched and unknown. Because for that much methane to erupt and set the sea ablaze, It can't just be a simple crack in the rock. It would have to be an enormous network of underwater caves, a sealed-off space capable of building pressure over weeks, even months. Perhaps it's the remains of an ancient geological system, or maybe a dormant volcanic branch that never fully died out. And then there are those who believe, without proof, but not without conviction, that it could be part of the so-called hollow Earth, a theory long dismissed, yet never completely forgotten. We can measure gas flows, capture the flames, and map the ocean floor. But none of that answers the question that matters most. Where do these systems actually lead? And if one day someone dares to follow the trail of fire downward, will there be a way back? The deeper the cave system stretched, the more it stopped feeling like part of Earth. The walls were too smooth, the silence too complete. The air, if it could be called that, was thick with strange gases and pressure changes. At some point, it stopped resembling a glacier and started feeling like a simulation. Not of anything we know, but of something we've only imagined. Miles above the icy surface of Jupiter's moon Europa or Saturn's Enceladus, scientists believe similar conditions might exist. Oceans sealed in darkness, life hidden not in sunlight, but in chemistry. And somehow, right here, buried in Greenland's ice, we had stumbled into something nearly identical. Robotic probes, meant for space, were suddenly useful here. Cables tangled, cameras froze, signals dropped out, just like they might on another world. Every moment inside these caves felt like stepping into the future of exploration. Because maybe the first alien environment we truly understand isn't light years away. Maybe it's been under our feet the whole time. Just as we begin to uncover the secrets of these frozen caves, many are already slipping away. What stayed perfectly preserved for thousands of years is now melting from the edges inward, reshaped by each passing summer. Entire corridors once carefully mapped have collapsed within months, their intricate walls now reduced to runoff and silence. But these aren't just empty spaces disappearing. They are frozen archives, filled with the breath of ancient atmospheres, the slow memory of mineral reactions, and microbial life that has never known sunlight. Each chamber is a page in Earth's forgotten diary, written in ice and gas. Yet in our attempts to understand them, we may be hastening their end. The heat from a single light, the pressure of one cable, the shift caused by one drone's weight. Each action carries a risk. We didn't arrive at the beginning of this story. We arrived at the moment it starts to vanish. And every answer we find feels like it's been whispered just once before being erased forever. Not every tunnel has collapsed. Somewhere in the silence, there is still a passage, narrow, untouched, holding its shape as if waiting for someone to arrive. The walls there are smooth, colder than the rest, and strangely quiet, not in the way that says nothing lives there, but in the way an ancient library might hush when you finally open its last unread page. We don't know how deep that passage runs, or how long it will last, but we do know it won't stay open forever. The ice is thinning, the pressure is shifting, and the messages written in cold are fading faster than we can learn to read them. What we've found beneath the glacier isn't just a hidden world. It's a version of Earth that came before us, and maybe a version of what could come after, a place that lived without sunlight, thrived in silence, and then piece by piece disappeared. Now we stand at its final threshold, holding the light. The last question is not what we'll find if we go deeper, but whether we'll understand what it's trying to tell us before it's gone. What if the coldest, darkest places on Earth still held secrets no one has ever seen? What if below the melting glaciers, there wasn't just ice, but something moving, breathing, alive? A sonar ping vanishes. A void appears, then another. And suddenly, the mission to measure meltwater turns into a journey into the unknown. This isn't just a story about ice. It's about a world hidden in silence, untouched by sunlight, older than memory, and maybe not entirely of this earth. Each summer, Greenland's glaciers release rivers of meltwater that carve hidden paths beneath the surface, subglacial streams that never see the light of day. But in one forgotten branch of this frozen maze, something extraordinary was waiting. Have you ever seen a place so silent it seems to swallow sound, where sonar pings vanish without a trace, and where void replaces echo with something almost aware? That's what happened here. A sensor dropped into the depths and found nothing. Another followed. Same result. It wasn't failure, it was the absence of anything to bounce off. A gap in the glacier, not a simple crack, but something deeper, a chamber. When the drone slipped inside, it felt like breaching the surface of another planet. The walls of ice were smooth and cold, curving inward with impossible grace, leading into a labyrinth of frozen architecture. Each chamber gave way to another, and then another, not randomly, but in a pattern that suggested purpose. Some were flooded with ancient brine that hadn't moved in millennia. Others lay hollow and dry, echoing with a silence that pressed against the ears. And still, the whole system felt too organized to be coincidence, like a structure grown rather than carved. The glacier wasn't just melting from the inside, it was unfolding, piece by piece, revealing something hidden in its frozen heart. And the real question wasn't just how deep it went, but why it felt so disturbingly deliberate, like it had been waiting all this time to be found. The deeper the drone moved, the more the ice seemed to erase everything behind it. Light, sound, even the sense of direction. Its lights didn't go out, but the darkness swallowed them anyway, as if the cave itself refused to be seen. You might think nothing could live in a place like this. No sunlight, no warmth, no oxygen, but scrape the wall, look closer, and something appears. Under the microscope, the ice comes alive. Tiny microbes, too small to see, too quiet to notice, cling to the frozen walls like dust in a forgotten room. They don't need sunlight or plants to survive. Instead, they live off the minerals in the rock and the faint traces of ancient gases trapped in the ice. These creatures aren't just surviving in extreme conditions. They've made this place home. They eat differently, they breathe differently, they respond to their surroundings in ways we still don't fully understand. This isn't just a cave filled with strange bacteria. It's an entire ecosystem built on rules completely different from the ones we know. No trees, no food chain, just chemistry, ice, and time. And somehow, it works. Deep within the glacier, scientists discovered something unexpected. Not just life, but the air it had been waiting for. Trapped between the ancient layers of ice were tiny pockets of gas, sealed off for tens of thousands of years. These weren't just frozen bubbles. They were time capsules, holding methane, hydrogen sulfide, and other rare gases untouched since before recorded history. At first glance, these pockets might seem like leftovers, silent, sealed, and harmless. But as the glacier shifts and cracks, some of them begin to leak. And when those ancient gases mix with the surrounding meltwater, something stirs in the silence. The microbes living nearby don't treat the gases as threats. They treat them as fuel. Some organisms awaken. Others change how they function, adjusting their chemistry to make use of whatever the glacier releases. It's not random. It's responsive, like a conversation happening in molecules. Here, survival doesn't depend on sunlight, warmth, or oxygen. It depends on how well life can read a chemical signal and adapt in the dark. And somehow, it does. This isn't just a cave filled with trapped air. It's a living system where gas becomes message, reaction becomes survival, and every breath the glacier takes ripples through the ecosystem around it. A place like this forces us to rethink what it means for something to be alive. The ocean has made itself heard before, but what if its darkest secrets say nothing at all? Off the coast of Southeast Asia lies a submerged cave filled with liquid the color of blood. It doesn't flow, it doesn't mix, it simply exists, silent, still, and sealed from the world outside. No currents carry it, no life stirs in it, and no one can explain what it is or why it hasn't left that place. What kind of water refuses to be part of the sea? And more importantly, what is it trying to keep hidden? No one knows exactly when the Red Water Cave was discovered. It doesn't appear on official maritime charts, nor does it show up in any geological survey. But the most widely circulated account dates back to around 2006, involving a group of amateur divers exploring the waters near Ticao Island in the southern Philippines, a region known for crystal-clear seas, limestone caverns, and more than a few local legends that tourists are politely advised to ignore. According to the group's leader, they were gliding past a rock shelf, about 40 meters deep, when one diver spotted something strange. A narrow opening partially hidden in the reef seemed to swallow their dive light completely. As they shone it deeper, the beam didn't bounce. It vanished into what looked like a pool of dark red liquid, thick enough to distort the light like molasses in a horror film. At first, they assumed it was sediment or perhaps some mineral runoff. That is, until they reviewed the footage and noticed the dive goggles had been slightly corroded, and a few of their sensor cables had started to rust, despite only 15 minutes of exposure and zero physical contact. The second attempt involved dropping a tethered camera deeper into the cave. It made it to about 70 meters. Then the signal cut. No static, no feed, just silence. And nothing unnerves a diver more than silence that starts right when the cave seems to notice you. After the diver's unsettling encounter, an independent research team decided to investigate the site, armed with specialized sampling equipment and, presumably, stronger nerves. What they brought back wasn't just unusual. It was chemically confused. Collected from about 60 meters deep, roughly 15 meters inside the cave, the liquid was a deep hematite red, not just in color, but in texture. It wasn't just murky, it was thick, almost syrupy. One scientist joked that if you bottled it and sold it as an energy drink, you'd get sued in 5 countries. Lab results showed an iron concentration of 14,300 parts per million, around 70 times higher than levels found in most mineral-rich marine zones. But iron was only part of the puzzle. Chemical analysis also revealed degraded protein structures, unaligned with any modern marine organism. Some researchers suspected remnants of ancient anaerobic bacteria. Others proposed it might belong to unclassified extremophiles, and all of them quietly asked the same question: how are these proteins even surviving in a mildly acidic, nearly oxygen-free environment? And just to make things weirder, the water inside the cave doesn't flow at all. It doesn't mix with surrounding seawater. It doesn't dilute when stirred. It just holds, like a bad secret, in liquid form. As if the ominous red goo wasn't unsettling enough, researchers soon realized the cave didn't just look lifeless, it might actively reject life altogether. After much debate, and probably a rock-paper-scissors tournament, the team decided to run biological tests using live marine specimens. They introduced shrimp, small deep-water fish and benthic organisms, creatures that normally laugh in the face of high pressure and weird salinity. None lasted more than 3 minutes. No signs of suffocation, no physical trauma. They simply stopped, like someone hit a universal off switch. Tissue analysis revealed membrane rupture and cellular damage consistent with exposure to protease activators, compounds typically found in high-security lab experiments, not seaside weekend dives. Even halobacteria, those salt-loving microbes that thrive in brine pools and toxic sludge, were nowhere to be found. The water wasn't just sterile, it was actively hostile to the idea of life. As one microbiologist put it, wide-eyed over his microscope, "This isn't dead water, it's water that never gave life permission to begin." South, no life, no current, just a thick, blood-red fluid with sky-high iron levels, suspicious protein bits, and a personality that screams, "Do not disturb." Naturally, no one's buying the idea that this is just a quirky corner of nature being dramatic. One theory suggests the cave used to be an ancient chemical lake, a sort of prehistoric toxic soup, once exposed to the air, now trapped beneath the waves. Sounds reasonable until you realize the samples show no sediment layering, no classic signs of organic decay, and absolutely zero fossilized algae whispering, "We were here." Another idea. It's a remnant of a deep-sea bioreactive event, like an old brine pool gone rogue. But the Redwater Cave lacks all the usual suspects. No methane, no hydrogen sulfide, not even a trace of the signature sulfuric stench that usually screams underwater trouble. Just silence. Dense, molecular silence. Then there's the conspiracy crowd's favorite, the cave as a forgotten site of Cold War-era bio-waste dumping. Picture a top-secret lab in the 70s deciding, "Let's pour this nightmare into a hole and never talk about it again." Honestly, wouldn't be the weirdest thing humans have done near water. Despite the range of theories, from the scientific to the mildly unhinged, they all agree on one chilling point. If this stuff ever leaks out, the local ecosystem might need therapy. As if the water weren't weird enough, the cave itself seemed built by someone who really didn't want visitors, or at least didn't believe in handing out a floor plan. No official map has ever managed to capture its full layout. Every remotely operated vehicle, ROV, sent down, loses signal around 80 meters, no matter the approach. And several digital compasses mounted on those ROVs have recorded sudden spins and flips, like the cave was actively messing with their sense of direction. Structurally, it's a narrow limestone chute, tilted at about 35 degrees, branching off into 3 corridors. Some ceilings are so low, less than 1.5 meters, you'd have to belly crawl in scuba gear, which feels like an elaborate dare from Poseidon himself. The upper surfaces are coated in a thin, reddish-purple crust, like dried blood that forgot to finish its business. No coral, no algae, no barnacles, not even sound bounces back. If the mysterious ocean hum once called Julia was the sea trying to be heard, then this cave feels like the sea holding its breath. No currents, no movement, no biological rhythm. Just a space where time itself seems to have checked out and left the door locked behind it. The exit and the questions that stayed behind. In 2011, local authorities issued an official advisory banning diving near the site, citing ecological and biohazard concerns, which is the polite way of saying, "We don't know what this is, but we'd prefer it stays in its creepy cave." Since then, any research has required approval and must be accompanied by independent safety monitors, preferably the kind that don't flinch at the phrase "chemical tomb." To this day, no one knows how deep the cave actually goes. No one's charted a full chemical profile of the red fluid. And while there's no evidence it's man-made, there's also no evidence that it's not. And that's exactly what makes the red water cave so unsettling. Because if it's blood, whose blood is it? If it's mineral, why does it kill everything that touches it? And if it's the result of something humans did and then buried, what on earth could be so dangerous that silence was the best solution? Sometimes, the scariest answers are the ones nobody's allowed to ask. What happens when the sea stops being still, not on the surface, but from deep below? In the warm, turquoise calm of the Caribbean, there are places where the ocean seems to quietly undo itself. No storms, no waves, just a slow, steady pull downward as if something beneath the seafloor is inhaling. From above, it looks harmless, a soft swirl in the water. But beneath that silence lies something vast, a tunnel, a crack, a sinkhole that doesn't end. The current vanishes, instruments fail, and what goes in doesn't always return. It isn't fire, it isn't ice, it's not even hostile, but it moves, it drinks, it changes the shape of the sea itself. And long before we understand how, it's already begun. They don't roar, they don't explode. These are not geysers or whirlpools. They are perfectly still at times. Yet water moves into them constantly, as if obeying a gravity stronger than the planets. Locals call them drains of the ocean. Scientists call them blue holes, cast windows, or subaqueous sink systems. But names don't explain how something the size of a football field can drink an entire bay and still be thirsty. What makes them even stranger is their shape. Some are vertical shafts plunging hundreds of meters. Others snake sideways under islands, tugging at the coastline. And some are so wide, divers describe the moment of entry as falling into a flooded cathedral. Currents reverse, temperatures drop, pressure builds in ways no wave can predict. And yet, they remain almost invisible. No violent surface warning, just a silent pull downward. For those brave enough, or foolish enough, to drop inside, the first thing they lose isn't their breath, it's their direction. There are few things more disorienting than diving into a space that curves without warning, narrows when you exhale, and echoes your heartbeat louder than any machine. These aren't hollow caves, they are mazes carved by time and water, with rooms that expand and contract depending on where the tide is flowing from. Divers report that compasses spin, light bends, and no two dives are ever the same, because these systems evolve with each storm, each shift in pressure, each minute. And if you think air tanks make you safe, think again. In one chamber, your oxygen may last an hour. Turn wrong, and in 5 minutes, you're surrounded by collapsed limestone with no exit, no bubbles, no rescue. The cave doesn't close behind you, it just keeps going. As the descent continues, the water gradually loses its familiarity. It thickens and stills, shifting from something that flows to something that seems to wait. There is no light here, but more unsettling than the dark is the silence. A silence so absolute, it presses inward, muffling thought, motion, even memory. In this space, the ocean feels suspended. Nothing moves, nothing grows. Even the walls seem frozen in time, coated not with coral or algae, but bare minerals untouched for centuries. The expectation of life fades quickly. No fish glide by. No tiny creatures dart across beams of light. There is only stillness, as if the sea itself has chosen to stop remembering this place exists. Some compare it to entering a room the world forgot. Others say it feels like trespassing through someone else's memory, one that was never meant to be disturbed. There is no menace, Yet there's the sense of being watched, not by eyes, but by time itself. Down here, it becomes hard to tell whether the ocean has emptied or simply chosen to keep its secrets sealed. For decades, no one could explain where all that water was going. It didn't flood the land, it didn't resurface, it simply vanished, until sonar revealed something stunning. Beneath some of these caves are horizontal rivers flowing underground for miles, sometimes hundreds of kilometers. Not just salty water, but fresh water too, stolen from inland aquifers and dragged through subterranean veins. These rivers don't obey surface geography. Some start in one country and end beneath the sea of another. In Belize, one such tunnel connected inland sea notes to coastal reef systems. In the Bahamas, divers traced a sinkhole's path 15 kilometers out to sea. The ocean doesn't just flow downward, it reroutes, it rewrites its own map underground. And these rivers too are changing, carving new tunnels, collapsing old ones. Each one is a fingerprint of a planet still in motion. Unlike ice or fire caves, these watery voids are not stable. They open, collapse, and reshape constantly. A cave mapped in 2015 may no longer exist in 2025. Some divers return to familiar routes only to find walls where passage once was. Or more chillingly, no walls at all where structure should be. And with every storm season, the Caribbean's limestone dissolves further. More holes appear, old ones deepen. Technology helps, but it also fails. Drones lose signal, GPS gets confused. Pressure sensors report things that shouldn't be physically possible, like water rising into dry chambers without any source. It's as if the caves are reacting, not alive, but not passive either. And with every meter lost, we also lose another chance to understand them. Because here, exploration doesn't always mean finding. Sometimes it means admitting we arrived too late. We've seen life claw its way through fire. We've seen microbes breathe through ice. But here, there's no resistance. There's no adaptation. There is only absence. These caves weren't made for life. They weren't even made for death. They just are. Openings in the earth that do not care if you enter or leave. And maybe that's what makes them so haunting. In the caves of lava, we saw survival. In the frozen chambers, we saw evolution. But here, in the sucking silence of the Caribbean's hidden hollows, we find something else entirely. A part of the planet that does not include us in its plans. We think Earth is ours because we've mapped its mountains, walked its deserts, and touched its skies. But these caves remind us there are still places we were never invited into. And maybe, just maybe, that's why they're still there. The ocean never shouts its secrets. It whispers them, through boiling vents in the dark, through frozen tunnels beneath the ice, through whirlpools that vanish into nothing, and places where opposites refuse to fight. We've seen the edges of nature fold into something unrecognizable. Fire that doesn't burn, ice that breathes, caves that inhale seawater like lungs. Each time, the mystery came with movement, with life, with pressure. But what if the next mystery doesn't move at all? What if it just lies there, silent, measured, unnervingly precise, like something left behind on purpose? Just off the coast of Biminy, beneath clear Caribbean water, a strange line of stone stretches across the seafloor. It doesn't glow, it doesn't shift, it doesn't even try to explain itself. And yet, it might be the loudest question the ocean has ever asked. It started with a routine aerial survey over the Bahamas in 1968. The pilots weren't expecting anything unusual, just the turquoise shallows of the Caribbean, unbroken and calm. But then, Just off the northwest coast of North Bimini, something appeared beneath the waves, a stretch of massive stone blocks, aligned in a clean, curved formation, like an ancient road leading into nowhere. The stones weren't scattered or jumbled, they were rectangular, flat, neatly joined edge to edge, extending over 300 meters like a paved walkway laid carefully by an invisible hand. Divers who explored the site were stunned, not by what they found, but by what they couldn't explain. The blocks sat too neatly. Some were stacked, as if part of a submerged wall or collapsed structure. Others rested in a near-perfect curve, as if once guiding travelers to a destination now lost. There were no chisel marks, no inscriptions, just the quiet presence of shape. Deliberate, uniform, unsettling. It wasn't the randomness of nature that echoed from the stones, but a strange sense of purpose. This wasn't a reef sculpted by current or debris from some long-forgotten wreck. It stood out not because it looked chaotic, but because it looked arranged. Too arranged. No one could say who had placed the stones, or whether anyone had at all. And yet, they rested there, calm, aligned, and completely out of place, as if the ocean had parted its surface just enough to whisper a question, left unanswered for thousands of years. For some, the stones weren't just unusual, they were prophetic. Nearly 30 years before their discovery, American mystic Edgar Cayce had predicted that the ruins of Atlantis would begin to rise near Bimini around the year 1968. And somehow, impossibly, the timeline matched, the location matched. Suddenly, what had been a geological curiosity began to look like a revelation. To believers, this wasn't erosion, it was evidence. They pointed to the formation's clean angles, to the curve that followed no natural current, to the stacked stones that looked more like walls than random slabs. Some saw outlines of chambers beneath the sand. Others imagined plazas, roads, or breakwaters, all swallowed by time and water. Not just a ruin, but a blueprint. Not just coincidence, but memory. It wasn't just the layout of the stones that fed the legend. It was what they suggested. A civilization old enough to be forgotten, advanced enough to leave behind no ordinary ruins, and mysterious enough to haunt us still. The idea of Atlantis, whether true or not, suddenly felt less like a myth, and more like a question, waiting for the right sea to answer it. But the ocean keeps two kinds of secrets, those it hides and those it makes look like something they're not. Geologists soon stepped in with a colder explanation. The Bimini Formation, they argued, was nothing more than beach rock, a natural sedimentary stone found in warm, shallow waters. Over time, with the right chemistry and pressure, layers of sand and shell harden into slabs, cracks form, lines appear, waves and tectonics do the rest. The result? A stone mosaic that looks eerily human. To science, this wasn't Atlantis, it was erosion with good timing. They pointed to other regions, coasts in Greece, Australia, and the Gulf of Mexico, where nature had produced similarly geometric patterns. Symmetry, it turns out, isn't exclusive to architecture. The Earth itself can carve lines straighter than a ruler and make blocks that rival any mason's work. And yet, even the skeptics admitted, Bimini felt different. Something about its curve, its proportions, the way it sat beneath just enough water to spark 1,000 theories. If it's natural, then it's one of nature's most convincing illusions. And if it's not, then someone, somewhere, built it before history knew how to record their name. Bimini, it turns out, is not alone in its ambiguity. Across the oceans, similar structures hide beneath the waves, sometimes stranger, sometimes clearer. Off the coast of Yonaguni, Japan, divers found submerged formations with what appear to be steps, platforms, and terraces, cut into the sea floor. In the Gulf of Cambay, India, sonar scans revealed what some claimed were sunken city grids. Near Cuba, blocks the size of trucks were found hundreds of meters below sea level, sitting in eerie silence. Each case sparks debate. Some are easily explained by geology. Others remain open wounds in the map of human history. But taken together, these sites suggest a pattern. Coastlines that may have once held life, knowledge, and structure, now drowned beneath the weight of rising oceans. When the Ice Age ended, sea levels rose by over 120 meters. That's enough to swallow entire islands, coastlines, even cities, if they were built close to the shore. What we now call seafloor may once have been someone's home. And if Bimini is part of that lost shoreline, just one visible stone among countless others still buried, then we're not chasing legends. We're following footprints. No one has proven that Bimini Road is Atlantis, but no one has disproven it either. That thin line between mystery and explanation is exactly why people keep coming back. Divers still return to the site, some with cameras, others with compasses and old maps. Researchers continue scanning the sea floor, looking for patterns no one has noticed yet, and tourists float above the stones, wondering if they're drifting over the ruins of something ancient and lost. To scientists, it may just be weathered beach rock. To others, it's a clue, one piece of a forgotten puzzle scattered across oceans and time. And in that gap between the two sides, the story keeps growing. The Bimini Road doesn't shout its purpose, but maybe that's what makes it powerful. Not because it confirms a legend, but because it refuses to disappear. And sometimes, the mystery that stays unanswered the longest is the one we're not quite ready to let go of. Before we sent probes to Mars or pierced the icy crust of Europa, our greatest mysteries were already here, just beneath the waves. For centuries, Atlantis haunted our imaginations, a city swallowed by the sea, too advanced for its time, too lost to prove real. But what if part of that legend didn't vanish beneath the ocean, but landed? In 2011, during what should have been a routine sonar scan of the Baltic Sea floor, a shape appeared, round, sharp, unmissable. 60 meters wide, almost perfectly circular, with a long drag trail behind it, as if it had crashed or skidded into place. The crew expected mud and sediment. They found a riddle. It didn't glow, it didn't hum, but it pulled them in like gravity. No one could say what it was, but the deeper they looked, the harder it was to believe it was just a rock. What do you do with something that shouldn't exist, yet sits there, unmoved, like it's been waiting? In the stillness of the Baltic Sea, the seafloor rarely surprises. It's a place of sediment and silence, where wrecks rust slowly and rock formations rarely stir excitement. So when a sonar sweep revealed something perfectly circular, 60 meters wide, and oddly isolated from its surroundings, the Ocean X crew didn't know what to make of it. It wasn't jagged like a reef or ridged like a fault line. It was singular. One shape, one shadow, sitting quietly in a place where everything else had been shaped by chaos, ice, time, and water. What made it unsettling wasn't just the size or symmetry. It was the fact that it stood out so completely, not part of a larger ridge, not half-buried or cracked, just there, centered, deliberate. The seabed around it offered no clues, no debris, no volcanic scars, no familiar pattern. It looked like something that had appeared rather than formed, resting motionless in the mud, as if untouched by the passage of time. Some on board suggested it might be a natural oddity. Others weren't so sure. Because in an environment where nearly every anomaly has a geological explanation, this one came with silence, and that silence was louder than anything else on the screen. The closer the team looked, the stranger it became. The formation wasn't just large, it was unnervingly smooth. The surface curved gently like a dome, marked by long, shallow ridges that ran in deliberate lines. Some of these lines curved downward in angles that resembled stairs, while others framed what looked like a hatch or a raised panel. There were no jagged edges, no fractures from tectonic movement, just clean, geometric features that defied the messy fingerprint of nature. Across the scientific community, attempts to label it stumbled. The usual explanations, glacial scarring, basalt outcrops, sandbars, fell short. Glacial movement doesn't carve domes. Sedimentary layers don't produce sharp right angles. Even erosion, the sea's most patient sculptor, doesn't leave patterns this orderly. What stood on the seabed didn't look eroded or collapsed. It looked constructed, and yet no tool marks could be found. No signs of metal, no known material, distinct from the surrounding stone. It was as if something had shaped the rock without cutting it, like it had been molded by a hand that never left a trace. In a world where randomness rules the underwater landscape, the anomaly was an exception. Too symmetrical, too intentional, and too silent to explain away. There are places in the ocean that feel alive. Volcanic vents, where heat and minerals feed entire ecosystems, or frozen caves, where invisible microbes persist in silence. But the area around the Baltic anomaly didn't feel alive. It didn't feel dead either. It just felt wrong. Divers who reached the site described a strange sense of disconnection. Not danger exactly, but an absence that's hard to put into words. There were no fish darting past, no algae clinging to stone, no sediment dancing in the current, just stillness, as if the seafloor had hit pause. What stood out wasn't what they saw, it was what was missing. No coral, no movement, not even microbial life in the sediment samples they collected nearby. The seafloor had texture, but no story, like nothing had ever touched it. The anomaly itself didn't emit sound, heat, or any obvious signal. It didn't hum, pulse, or glow, but it seemed to affect its surroundings all the same. Not with energy, but with presence. For something so physically unremarkable, it created a space that felt completely out of place. Not in the way it looked, but in how everything around it seemed to stop behaving the way it should. When sonar images of the anomaly reached the public, the reaction was immediate. Its near-perfect symmetry, dome-like shape, and unusual grooves didn't match any known undersea formation. From above, it looked more like a designed structure than a product of nature. Some noticed features resembling stairs or walls. Others pointed to the long trench behind it, as if the object had once moved or landed. Equipment malfunctions near the site added to the puzzle, raising questions science struggled to answer. Geologists proposed glacial movement or erosion, but none of the typical patterns were there. The object didn't quite fit any category, and attempts to classify it left even skeptics unsure. It wasn't just the mystery of what it is. It was the persistent sense that it doesn't belong, and in a place where everything should have an explanation. That absence became the most unsettling part of all. Over a decade has passed since the anomaly was first discovered, and yet it remains exactly as it was, untouched, unchanged, and unresolved. It hasn't shifted, worn down, or revealed anything new. Time passes, but the structure stays frozen in its quiet defiance. Unlike other underwater mysteries where life adapts, thrives, or evolves, the Baltic Sea Anomaly doesn't want to be understood. It offers no signals, no growth, no answers, only a stubborn stillness that resists every attempt to classify it. Researchers return with better tools, clearer scans, stronger theories, but leave with the same questions. Nothing down there reacts, yet something about it continues to hold attention, as if meaning lingers just beyond reach. Maybe it's not hiding anything. Maybe what we see is all there is, or maybe we've only just scratched the surface of something far older, far stranger, and far more deliberate than we're ready to accept. Some underwater mysteries arrive with flashing lights, strange gases, and a full cinematic soundtrack. Others, they sneak up quietly. No music, no monsters, just a diver, a patch of mud, and a moment of, wait, is that a footprint? That's how this one started. Not with ancient ruins or glowing jellyfish, but with a trail, long, deliberate, oddly calm, pressed into the seafloor near Abkhazia Bay. No drama, just unease. Like walking into a room and forgetting why you're there, except the room is the bottom of the Black Sea, and the floor is covered in giant steps. What kind of creature leaves footprints that size underwater? And was it just passing through or planning to come back? It started like any other dive. Flat sand, lazy ripples, the quiet hum of equipment in the background. But a few minutes in, the diver's camera drifted across something strange. A long indentation in the sediment, curved just slightly as if molded by something massive pressing down. Then came another, exactly the same distance away. Then a third. The rhythm was impossible to ignore. They looked like footprints, enormous ones, deep, clean, perfectly aligned. Not gouges from machinery, not scars from nets or anchors. These had shape, structure, purpose. What made them disturbing wasn't their size, but their design. They were just human enough to be recognizable, but too large, too spaced out, and far too symmetrical to belong to any known diver, animal, or machine. The trail curved gently out of sight, fading into the blue like a path waiting to be followed. And then came that strange, uncomfortable flicker in the brain, like remembering a dream you never had. The diver couldn't place it, but the shape, the stride, the silence, it all felt uncannily familiar, like something they'd already seen, somewhere deep in memory, but never spoken aloud. It didn't feel like a new discovery. It felt like something had returned. The prints didn't start with a splash or a crack. They simply showed up. The first one eased out of the sand, like a thought you weren't supposed to think. Then came another, then another, spaced evenly, curving ever so slightly across the seafloor. No fanfare, no crater, just quiet geometry. There were no cliffs, no landslides, no lost ship that could have done this. It wasn't wreckage, it wasn't chaos. It was organized, deliberate in the kind of way that makes geologists rub their temples and say, please don't be aliens. Geological explanations fell apart quickly. The local tectonic plates were asleep. No earthquakes, no fault lines, no underwater drama. And if this was erosion, then erosion suddenly had an art degree and a talent for alignment. Could it have been machinery? Maybe. But nothing in the region matched the size or pattern, not even the larger ROVs used for deep-sea mapping. Besides, machines leave trails. These didn't drag, they stepped. Which left one possibility people didn't want to say out loud. Maybe something had walked there. And not recently. So now the team was stuck with two options. Either nature was doing performance art, or something had been down there with legs, a destination, and frankly, excellent posture. They brought in the best tools available: 3D scanners, sediment samplers, and laser-based spacing metrics, hoping that data would bring clarity where instinct had failed. But instead of answers, the measurements only deepened the mystery. The impressions were too symmetrical to be dismissed as random, yet too impractical to match anything mechanical. Their depth, width, and spacing seemed to follow a logic, just not one anyone could recognize. One researcher, after staring too long at the simulation, muttered what others had been thinking all along. It's like someone designed this pattern for legs that don't exist anymore. The surrounding mud offered no help. There were no collapse marks, no suction voids, no smudges or drag lines that might suggest movement by a vehicle or natural shift. Whatever had created these impressions didn't roll or slide. It stepped, with weight, with rhythm, and then vanished, leaving behind no trail, no residue, no explanation. Trying to analyze it felt like studying a footprint from a dream, too detailed to be imagined, too real to make sense. But dreams don't leave symmetrical craters in the seafloor. And this one clearly did. Most oddities get pulled into ancient legends, sea dragons, lost cities, angry gods with flippers. But not this one. No local folklore speaks of giants stomping around Abkhazia Bay. No ancient civilization warned about a wandering behemoth in the Black Sea. And maybe that's what makes it worse. Because when there's a monster, people know what to be afraid of. When there's a story, we can file the mystery away with a knowing wink. But when there's nothing, just a pattern and silence, we're stuck staring at holes in the mud and inventing theories that even we don't buy. Could it be ancient? Sure. Could it be alien? Maybe. Could it be erosion with a sense of humor? Honestly, that's just as plausible. But sometimes, the most unsettling mysteries are the ones that don't even try to explain themselves. Among all the wild guesses and hesitant conclusions, one theory refuses to go away. What if this anomaly isn't a message from the cosmos or a prank from nature, but something far more ordinary? What if it's human? Not modern human, perhaps, but a relic from an age of experiments and prototypes, half remembered by history and long since buried by bureaucracy. During the Cold War, engineers across the globe sketched all kinds of mechanical absurdities: walking rigs, underwater legged platforms, experimental sea crawlers too ambitious to work and too expensive to finish. Maybe one did. Imagine a forgotten test machine, huge, clunky, built to stride along the sea floor. Imagine it worked, just briefly, and no one bothered to tell anyone else. Over time, the metal would vanish. But the footprints, those could remain. Just long enough for someone to find them and forget they made them. Because the past isn't always buried. Sometimes it's just muddy. In the end, the trail remains. It hasn't changed. It hasn't deepened or disappeared. It just waits. Quiet, unclaimed, like a question scratched into the seabed. Maybe it's geological. Maybe it's historical. Maybe it's none of the above. No one has taken responsibility. No country has classified it. And no creature has returned to complete the path. It just sits there, an open parenthesis in the middle of the ocean. And maybe not every mystery needs to be solved. Some are meant to be observed, to be remembered, to keep us wondering what else the world might still be hiding under a few meters of mud and a whole lot of silence. Not every footprint leads somewhere. Some just remind us we're not the only ones who've ever walked here.